Hello friends, good afternoon, good evening. uh it's your girl Grace here. I am so pleased to be coming to you today with the first installment of what we are calling the animal series. So throughout this week, we're going to be looking at animals, and specifically animals that are mentioned in the Bible that are portrayed in a favorable manner. So we're going to study those animals to see what we can learn from them. So that is what we're doing this week, the animal series. And so first up on today's schedule is the eagle, my favorite bird. I really love the eagle. And so we're going to have ourselves a very brief but very succinct conversation today, to look at three main things, just three. We're not going to belabor the point. We're going to look at three main things that we can learn from the eagle and that we can apply to our personal lives. And if you're like me, you already kind of know a lot of things about the eagle. So I don't want to belabor the little details, the things that we kind of know, the general information. I want to go a little bit deeper into the granular level to see things that we can get out of this bird that is not everyday knowledge, and frankly that is not limited to its physiological prowess. So in other words, I want us to look at three things that we can learn from the eagle, that we don't necessarily have to be like an eagle to have wings and to soar physically into the heights that it does, but we can learn from it and apply it in our own environment, in our lives, in our daily work, and whatever that we're dealing with. So I'm going to go straight into it. Again, like I said, I don't want to belabor the point. We know the eagle is the largest bird, one of the most powerful birds. Its wings are just majestic. If you look at it from tip to tip, it's at least 8 feet. It's very strong. It has that powerful beak that it used to shred its prey, and so that's how it feeds, and it kills its prey using its talons, or you can call them claws. So the eagle is really a very physiologically gifted bird. It has a lot of advantages physically that makes it one of really at the top of the food chain when it comes to birds. And so, but one thing that it really has that makes it really distinctive is its sight, and that is the first point of our 3 points we're going to discuss today. The eagle's eyes. The eagle has this fine eye, very high resolution vision. That is why we have the expression eagle-eyed. That's how we refer to people that have very keen vision, that can see things at really that very granular level, who pick up really very fine details, people who do not miss things, like they get things. So that is the first point that we're going to look at, the eagle's vision. Now the eagle on average is about 10 pounds, so it's a large bird compared to other birds. But obviously compared to other animals or even the human being, it's small. Nevertheless, its eye is as large as a human eye. So imagine your eyes as big as they are on your human body, proportional to your face. The same eye, the same size on a 10-pound bird. Now you begin to see the advantages that it has, vis-a-vis its vision. And so that's why it can see as far away as 2 miles. Yes, 2 miles. In fact, research has shown that the eagle, not only can it see far away as far as 2 miles, but if they had like 5 birds or 5 little creatures like squirrels or rabbit or a puppy, 5 puppies in that distance of 2 miles, the eagle can spot it. And even the ones that are trying to hide maybe in the bush, the eagle can see it. Its vision is that detailed. And not only that, it can make out 5 different colors from that distance and know them in fine detail. Now, it's also interesting that how this vision helps it in hunting, in getting its food, in capturing its prey, because as it is descending from the height that it is, because we know the eagle dwells, in those great heights, and that will be our next stop, our next point. So as the eagle is descending to the earth, the corneas, I don't want to say the cells, but the eyes adjust with each level, with each feet of descension, as it comes down, it's continuously adjusting so that it's seen, so it doesn't get, its vision is never fuzzy at any point. My friends, that is very, very important. It never wants to get it. There is never a point that he lets that prey out of his sight. Even the small squirrel, it's looking at it, it's watching it, and if the squirrel is trying to hide and it's darting around, it is following it. It's keeping track of where that little animal is going. So when it descends, it goes to the place where it actually is and swoops its prey. And that's how it makes its kill. And so we can see that the eye is very, very important then for the eagle. And for us, I want to use that, the analogy of the eye to refer to our vision, and not just a physical vision. Now I'm speaking spiritually and mentally. I'm speaking even psychologically as well. That there is a certain way we ought to be able to see things. The eagle is this fine, wonderfully beautiful made bird with all its advantages, and so he uses them to in a way that aids his life, that facilitates his living, that helps it dwell in the habitat that he has. The same thing with us. We have to be able to see well if we are going to be able to dominate the domain that God has given us. If we are going to be able to thrive in our environment, we have to be able to have good vision. We have to be able to see clearly. We have to be able to see our way, and not just sometimes, all the time. We have to have that clarity of vision and purpose, knowing precisely where we are going like the eagle does. So we are not cast to and fro. We are not confused. We know we can see clearly where we are going, and that comes from vision. That comes from being able to see differently than, say, the average person. That comes from destiny related, having that purpose, that that path that you're supposed to walk, and not to deviate from it, or like the book of Joshua chapter 1, that this book of the law, that you should meditate on this book of the law and should keep it before your eyes day and night, and you should not turn either left from right, and to do what's everything that is written therein. So my friends, that is a kind of spiritual vision that we need to have, to be able to see from a high altitude, to see in a way that the regular person doesn't see, to have that advantage of insight, to have that advantage of discernment, to have that advantage where we don't go with the masses, that our thinking and our acting is not ordinary, and so we are not just blown away with the crowd or with the wind, as the case may be, but we are distinctive. We differentiate ourselves from the crowd because of the way we see, because we have the advantage of altitude, because we can see from afar and also see clearly and finely to get the minute details. Sometimes we can get the grand picture, but it might not be enough. We need more information. We need things at that very vivid, detailed, granular, cellular level like the eagle does. So that is the first point. The second point I want to make for us, I kind of referred to it already, is elevation. The eagle is a very, very interesting bird. I would say it's into high elevation. The eagle lives on high, really. It courts on high, it mates on high, it hunts from on high, it breeds its children on high. So let's look at it again. The eagle, when it wants to hunt, first of all, it already has, it's at this there, it has this they call it, like the bird's eye view, this panorama of the entire place where it's hunting, and you can see for distances, like we said before, for 2 miles, up to 2 miles. So now the eagle is hovering right up there, and it can see the prey from down here, so it hunts from on top. So it has the advantage of being able to see its prey without its prey necessarily seeing it. So the eagle lives high up there in everything that is done. Its mindset, its living, its hunting and breeding and reproduction is at an elevated level. It knows the prowess that it has. It knows the advantages that it has, and it does not waste it coming down to live like the other normal, I'll call them regular animals. They do not have its beauty of powerful wings. They do not have its advantage of sight. They do not have its intelligence. So they cannot live that way, but it's up there, and it never makes the mistake of coming down here to mingle, to stay among the other birds. It's high up there. It hunts from there. If I want to eat, I go up there and I look down. I'm always reigning from this elevated spot. I'm always looking down at my prey and to have my peak when I want. And also the same way when they want to mate, they mate up in the sky. Again, it's another way of differentiating to make sure that the mate you have is the worthy one. I know I am an eagle. Are you an eagle? The one good way you demonstrate that to me is to meet me up there. Last week we talked a little bit about we remember the discussion on Othniel, the nephew of Caleb, who married Caleb's daughter, Answer. This is found in Judges chapter 1, I think also in Joshua chapter 15. So in that passage that we talked about last week, we saw how when Caleb wanted to give his daughter's hand in marriage, he had the young men prove their worth, sort of, and he said, whoever can conquer this mountain area of the Beer, and then I'll give my daughter's hand in marriage to that young man. And so we were told in the very next sentence that his nephew, Othniel, who was the son of Caleb's younger brother, Kenaz, took that area. And when he took the area, then Caleb gave his daughter in marriage to Othniel, and Othniel also eventually became the first judge of Israel. And so we looked at that last week when we talked about the demonstration of worthiness, of being suitable. In English they use the term of suitors, like the men who are trying to woo a young woman and to get her to marry them. The expression is they are suitors. So sometimes we have to have people who are suitors, who are suitable. So the idea is for the young lady to have the opportunity to look at this young man and see who is suitable for her as a husband, because we know not everybody is suitable material for a husband. And the same thing with wife. Not every woman is a wife, not every man is a husband. So these suitors are supposed to demonstrate their suitability as husband material or as wife material. So in this case, when the eagle mates, it mates high up there in that elevated position, so that another eagle has to demonstrate its worth by flying high up there where it is. In fact, the female eagles, like most females in many species, they are stronger than the male eagle. And so she can soar sometimes a little higher and faster than the male eagle. And so when the male eagle is interested in her, she tests him. And that's what I think we should do too. And again, not just in relationships. Test the guy you're going to get married to. Test the woman you're going to get married to. Not to tempt them, to test them, to say, I want to see your values. I want to see the things that are important to you. I want to see if we share the same morals and interests. Of, do we have the same vision of life? Do we have the same goals? Are we going the same place? The Bible says, how can two work together except they agree? If we do not agree on where we're going, there is no point getting married, because we're going to be logging our heads after we say I do. The I do's, the beautiful dress, and the party, and the priest or the pastor, and the entire the ceremony is not going to make the disagreements go away. So I want to know where your heart is. I want to know where your mind is. I want to know if you're someone that I want to cleave to, because this is a cleaving. There will be no separation after this. So it's very important that I test that you're suitable. So we see the eagle here, she tests the male. The female eagle should test the male to see if he can rise to the height that she is. And one way she does it is she would take a twig high up that she would have cut off from a branch, and she would drop it. She would drop it from that height that she is, and then watch what the male does. I said these birds are so intelligent, because not only is she testing him in terms of his strength of flight, I'm looking at it from a human mindset. Is he a gentleman? If he will not drop for you to pick up that twig for you, now that he's interested, he will not do it when you say yes. Ladies, if the guy would not be chivalrous, if he can be courteous, if he can be respectful and kind when he's still quoting you, when you still checking his suitability, I tell you right now that he's not going to do it after you've said I do. After you've married him and you've gone home and you've given him everything he wants, forget it. So if you truly want to know what you're going to get, check it now when you still have a chance to back out. Gentlemen, the same is true for you too. We should all check the suitability of the relationships we want to get in. Even in business, you want to check that this business partner is honest. This is somebody that you can go into business with without going bankrupt, without going in trouble. You want to check their integrity, because that is key. I don't care how brilliant someone is. I don't care how good they are in sales or in management or in whatever thing that you're looking at as a business advantage. If there is no integrity, if that person is not honest, you will eventually have a problem. There is not enough money in the world to cover the lack of integrity. There is not enough money in the world to cover the lack of a good character. Even if you make $10 billion, you will still get in trouble. He or she is gonna they might embezzle it. They will not be accountable for it. And so we have to be careful to check the suitability of our relationships before we get into them. And so what we see here, the ego is teaching us, is that from that elevated position, it's saying, see, this is where I dwell. I am not going to descend for you. I know what I am made of, and I know what I bring to the table. I know what I can contribute, but I also want to know that you are a good match for me. And so I am going to go where I dwell and watch what you do. Can you come up here? Can you meet me here? Can you meet me here character-wise? Can you meet me here in your values? Can you meet me here in your vision? Can you meet me here and hopefully excel me too? Because I want somebody that I can look up to. I want somebody that will challenge me. I want somebody that will make me want more. I want somebody that I'll respect. I want somebody that I know when the chips are down, he or she can stand and fight with me. That I won't have to be dragging them, but there'll be a powerful soldier with me while we build a life together, while we build a business together, while we build a friendship together. Are you going to be a drag, or are you going to be an addition? Are you going to be an asset or a liability? What are you? And the only way for me to know is what you do when the demand is placed on you to accelerate, to ascend. Are you coming, or you're down there hoping that I'll come back down there and meet you? That is not going to happen. The ego, they do not do that. She's right up there and say, catch me if you can. If you want this, come up here. And so she drops the twig. The male eagle runs and he swoops down fast and gets it and brings it back to her. And she ascends even higher than she did the first time, drops the twig again, and watches what he does. And she repeats it for a while until she's satisfied that this is the right male eagle with whom she wants to copulate. And so they start a family. And the eagles are very loyal. They have a certain fierce fidelity to each other that is really not among certain birds of prey, and they're made for life. So when an eaglet finally makes up her mind that she wants to copulate, not an eaglet, the female eagle, that she wants to copulate with the male eagle, the two of them are set for life. That is it. They don't wander. They have a monogamous relationship. Again, that's another thing we want to glean from. All of us love loyalty. Even Judas, the Judases who want loyalty, the people who will betray you, they want you to be loyal to them. I've never met any human being who will say, you know what, I don't care if you're loyal to me. I don't care if you really, if I can trust you or not. I don't care if you're for me or not. If someone says that, then they are not committed in that relationship with you. It means that they are not investing anything. They're not putting their heart into it, so they don't care how it turns out, because they're not going to get hurt in any way. They haven't put anything that they are afraid of they might lose. They have no skin in the game. And the last person, honestly, that you want to have a relationship with is someone who hasn't put any skin in the game. Because if they haven't put any skin in the game, they won't be tending to it. The only person who's going to tend to something very well is when they have a personal stake, when they have an interest in it, and then they want to watch it, they want to guard it, they want to protect it. But the person who will quickly betray something is someone who has no, they don't feel about it anyway. It can go well or not, they don't care. They might not be hurt because their heart is not in it. They have not invested anything in it, so they couldn't give a damn how it turns out. Again, that's a risky person to get into any kind of relationship with. Again, whether it's personal or business, professional, whatever, you want someone who is fully in there with you. And also, honestly, something that you're not fully committed with, I doubt how successful that thing will become, how it will grow over time, because commitment is a cornerstone of progress. When you're truly committed to something, then you will fight for it. Then you will really push for it. Then you'll be finding new ways to making it better. And even when things are going by, you're hanging in there and you forgive and you come back and you put some more fuel in the fire to keep the embers burning. But if someone is not committed, then at the first sign of trouble, they will bail. And not even that, even when they are there, their performance is lukewarm, again, because their heart is not in it. And so we don't want that kind of relationship. We want a committed person. And I like to say a way that you will know commitment is test it, frankly, in little ways. Watch what people do. Not that you're trying to put them through a grinder or anything. I just want to know who I'm with. I want to know who I'm with if I go into battle. I don't want to walk into battle and find out that you're a wimp. I don't want to walk in there where I need you to stand up and I find you crawling on all fours or hovering, cowering in the corner. That is not the time to find out that, oh my goodness, the guy who's supposed to have my back, the girl who's supposed to have my back is not even there. I'm alone. Not a pleasant thought at all. And finally, friends, let's go on to the, well, actually, one more thing about the elevation. I was talking about how eagles had the live at a high altitude, right? So the live there, we talked about how the mate in the high altitude. We talked about how they hunt, they get their prey from that high elevation. And lastly, that's also where they rear their young. So their nests are mostly built at the top of very high trees or at mountain tops or like really at the very highest elevation that they can find in the area in which they are. And so that is very important for a couple of reasons. The very first one is, since they are high up there, they have fewer predators. There are not many animals or birds that can ascend to that really high elevation to bother them or to eat their eggs that are still in the nest. So they are relatively safe. They have relatively few predators. Some of the predators, they don't really eat the eggs. They'll just step the nest, but they don't really bother the eagles that much. But they do have predators like some owls, raccoons that can climb to those elevation when it's really a tree. But if it's in rocks, it's even safer for them there. And sometimes they're really hanging by the very tip and the edge of the rock. They're that daring. And then finally, about the elevation, I want to talk about something that is called thermal soaring. Thermal soaring is something that is common to many birds that fly at this altitude, especially eagles and geese. You have storks and maybe herons. So they fly at this high altitude. But since we're talking about the eagle, let's look at this. And this is very important. This is one of my favorite things, in fact, about the eagle. And I want to look at it from the standpoint of risk taking. You see, when the eagle takes off, that is the only time it really flaps its wings. So it could break the current and elevate. It's almost like a plane trying to take off, or even a rocket. There's a lot of energy is put in at the very outset to break through and to start ascending. But when it ascends up to a certain elevation, it just glides. It doesn't flap its wings anymore. And because it doesn't flap that much, so it can conserve energy, so which means that it can stay for a longer period of time at that elevated level, because it's not expending a lot of energy. And it can also help it migrate for long distances without wearing out, without getting tired, because it hasn't exhausted itself by flapping. It is just gliding. Another thing is that because it is gliding and it's conserving energy, it helps it hunt better. So it can stay there for a long time and watch its prey and calculate and plan when it's going to strike and grab the prey. But my favorite thing about the thermal gliding is what is called updrafts. Updrafts are like any kind of air or gas that is shooting upward, that's pushing upward. So the thermal are like warm currents of air. And then together with the updrafts, they provide this kind of perfect environment where the eagle can ride the storm. That's where we get the expression of riding the storm, that where the eagle rides the storm. So the eagle is so intelligent, it's so brilliant, and it's a risk taker as well. Because when the storm is coming, and while the other birds are hiding in the trees and the leaves, trying to stay away from the storm, the eagle makes a very risky move. It times it very carefully and descends into the storm. Not only does it go into the storm to ride those thermal updrafts, but it also makes sure it goes to the very center, the eye of the storm, and then it just glides there. So it allows that warm air and the rising updraft to lift it up and then to propel it forward. So it basically is just gliding on top of the wing, on top of that hot air, on top of something that the other birds are weary of, are scared of, yet the eagle goes in there to be uplifted. I say that because I say it is risky, because obviously it can get engulfed in that. And sometimes when you look at young eagles that haven't mastered the art of actually blending themselves into that updraft, into that thermal current, they can get carried away. But the mature eagle that has experience, it knows the exact right moment to drop into that air and to let it move it forward. So there is a risk taking. And another thing is that it takes a lot of brilliant calculation. That's the thing. Someone can be so good at what they do. Like you can look at a LeBron James, for example. And I like to say those people, because they are so good, they make something very difficult look easy and then encourage you, make you feel like you can do it. And so when we look at the eagle, with the ease with which it dives into and rides that hot thermal air, it is so fascinating that, you know, we can think that it is not that hard until maybe you see an aircraft get caught in the same thermal current, and then you see the turbulence, then you begin to respect what the eagle does. And so I want to talk to us about that risk taking. Sometimes when we want to go where we want to go, we have to get out of flapping our wings. When you start out, you're flapping, you're trying to get off. You're trying to get some recognition. You're trying to get some experience. You're trying to maybe get the right networking, whatever you think you need to do. But after a point, we need to start thinking like the eagle. We need to start setting ourselves apart and say, you know what? Where are the risks that everybody's avoiding? Where is the thing that everyone is running away from? Like I ought to take advantage of. And it's so important for us to not just notice it, but to take advantage of. I'm going to make a personal confession here right now. In 2006, 2007, I was looking at the stock market go up, and house prices, now I'm talking about in the United States or Northern America, North America, the Northern Hemisphere in general, or maybe in Europe too. And I kept saying, this is unsustainable. I will have these conversations with my friends, and I'll say, this is unsustainable. This is crazy. It cannot be. I remember a little property that, a little property that we had at the time, and we had the appraisal, and I was saying, this is crazy. I won't pay that much. Are you telling me that it's worth this much? I kept telling my husband, I said, listen, this thing it's gonna go down. It's gonna crash. It doesn't make sense. It can't just keep going on and on and on like that. And so that was 2006, when it looked like the sky was the limit and everybody was getting in like, go buy, come on, it's the good times. It's like the roaring 20s all over again. The times are good. It's never been this good, and it's not going to stop. And everybody was drinking the Kool-Aid and doing those things. And I kept saying, this is going to crash. It is going to crash. Watch it. 2006, 2007. By the close of 2007, we started seeing the signs of it. By 2008, it was insane. Everything had hit rock bottom. Another thing, this is where I said my mistake was. I kept saying, this is a good time to buy a property. This is a good time to buy this. This is a good time, but I didn't. For many reasons, I really didn't have the capital to do it. But the problem, I honestly have to say, maybe if I really looked at unconventional ways of raising the capital, maybe I would have been able to do it. I really didn't go into a solutions mode like I ought to have. And in hindsight, I really regret it, because I saw not just a crash coming, but I also recognized that this was a good time to get back in the market when everybody was fleeing. The point is, why do I say this? I'm trying to say, to take the risk means two things. It's not just to see it. You have to descend and grab your prey. So while you're at that level, eagle, while you see the storm and everybody's fleeing, and you can get in there in the eye of the storm, ride it to your destination. It is not enough to see the storm coming. You have to get into it. You have to dip your foot in the water. As dangerous as it looks, as unconventional as it looks, as threatening as it looks, you have to take the risk and go through. When you say it, trust what God is showing you. Trust your God and find new ways. And that's another thing. We have to be creative. My point was I wasn't resourceful. Now you see why I like the topic of resourcefulness, because I've learned my lesson. We have to be resourceful. I kept looking at the regular way of raising capital. If I had looked outside of that, if I really looked hard, I believed I would have found a way. Now I've learned. But that is the point. The point is, it is not enough to see it. You have to take it. You have to take advantage of it. If you see the storm and you know that everybody's running and this storm looks dangerous, but that if you can find a way to tame it like the eagle does and to just get in that eye and find your good spot that you can ride it to something beneficial for you, you have to do that. Seeing is not enough. It is a taking of the advantage of it that proves that you've seen something, right? That is how it shows that you see differently from other people. You remember our first point was about vision, to see differently. So when you take advantage of what you've seen, that's how you demonstrate that other people look at you like, oh, how did you know that? How did you see that? How were you able to figure that out? But if you don't take advantage of it, then you might as well not have seen anything. Then you're just like everybody else. Like in my case, there was no way you can tell that I knew what I knew at the time, because I did not take advantage of it. So I'm just going to say to us, take the risk when you can see clearly, when your vision shows you in a way that you're sure that this is going. Don't hesitate. And if you need to, find new ways. Be resourceful. Be resourceful. When the eagle rides those thermal winds, it's not only one. It's riding one. Then when another one is coming, it aims it and goes into it again. And it keeps doing that for as long as it needs. That's the same thing. We have to keep you have to be flexible with the situation and see, what do I need to do today and next week? That resourcefulness again, you have to feed yourself and adapt into the situation to get you to your destination. It is so very important, my friends, that when you see it, walk where God is showing you. Let that advantage of sight help you get something out of it. There's no point in seeing something and then it makes no difference for you and you end up like someone who didn't say it. That is not a recipe for progress where we're trying to go. But then again, I'm sharing my personal experience with you so that maybe you're seeing something in your life that you're looking at it and you know this is the short time to do it, but for some reason you're still hesitating. Please do not do that. Maybe I'll be rich by now already if I had done what I said. If I just acted the way I should have acted on the foresight that I had. And lastly, I want to talk to us about something that is called the dead zone, like to die, dead zone. A little bit of information. Mountaineers who climb very, very high altitudes, I'll say maybe 20,000 feet or more, like Everest and all the other Himalaya mountains on the range of the Himalayas, they know this, that in short, actually, after 10,000 feet, really, it's called the dead zone. Why is it called the dead zone? The dead zone is that altitude where oxygen is in short supply. So in other words, as we rise, as the elevation increases, as the altitude increases, the air gets thinner, the air pressure is drastically reduced, and the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere, in the air that we inhale, in the air that we breathe, is about a third of what we will get at sea level, like where we are, you and I right now. So the higher we climb, then the less oxygen we get into our lungs, and that is dangerous for human beings because we know we are not adapted for that. We're not built for such high elevations. And so literally, when you get, two things are happening to you. You're slowly dying, but you don't know it. You can literally be hanging out there with your friends, with your mates, and you're dying. The reason why you're dying is because your body is not getting the oxygen that it ought to be getting. So two things, there are two ways you can solve that. You either have an additional oxygen tank with you, or you descend. You come down to a lower elevation. Now, obviously, these mountaineers, with practice and over time, they found a way to ascend higher and higher. But they are not immune, though, from what is called there are two things that can happen. It's called the really high altitude sickness, and so it manifests itself in headaches. So the higher up you climb, you can start getting headaches, and you can start having some dizziness, nausea, lethargy. You're just getting disoriented in general. The reason is because, again, you're not getting enough oxygen, and so because you're not getting enough oxygen, your organs are slowly dying. That's what happens. And so there's something called the high altitude pulmonary edema, which is that because you're not getting the amount of oxygen that you ought to be getting, then your lungs are slowly being filled with fluid. And when that happens, the person can really get sick. They cough. Sometimes they can start coughing blood. And when that is not treated, or if they're not brought down to a lower elevation, they can either go into coma or they can even die. And the other one is the high altitude cerebral edema, which means that the brain, again, because it is not getting enough oxygen, it starts swelling. But the bad thing for the brain, though, is because it is encased in our skull, that very strong muscle there, the bone. So because the brain is inside the skull, but now it's swelling, and then the skull is squeezing it because there's no space for it to go, then that's a problem. Sometimes the brain can actually start bleeding. Blood can start leaking to the brain, and we don't need to be told, we don't need to be a doctor to realize that is not a good situation for the person. So all these cases can cause severe problems for the person who is at that high elevation. And in fact, I was just doing a little bit of reading. It says that about at least 200 people have died trying to climb Mount Everest, trying to rise to the high elevation. And so of that 200 plus people, the majority of them died in that dead zone, that area where it really is very difficult to breathe. You're breathing, but for each inhalation, for each respiration that you take, you only get a third of what you normally would get. So your blood is not being furnished with the oxygen that it needs to do its job, as it's pumping to all the organs and cells and doing everything that it does for our bodies to keep us alive. Now, let me see how this applies to our ego. The eagle has an advantage, and not just the eagle, there are some other birds that even have a bigger advantage, like the geese, that can enable them to fly at very high altitudes without any of these problems I just discussed. So why, if we get up there without the right preparation and we are not acclimatized, we can really die, like we can really die. But they don't. In fact, I read that not just the eagle, the geese, there's a geese that flies over the Himalayas twice a year, and it can rise to altitudes of about 60,000 feet. Now, the Everest, which is the highest peak on Earth, it's about 29,000 feet and some change. These geese, they fly twice that. That is how high they fly every time. And scientists have studied them. They found out it is simple. One of their main reasons, besides the physical attributes of their wings and their legs and everything, that it is somehow the mitochondria. Mitochondria is that organelle in our cells that help us produce energy, that theirs is so well adapted that it helps them efficiently manage oxygen, that thing that we need to breathe, to be alive. So they can manage theirs very well, so that they can fly for longer distances and high above those high elevation, so the air pressure doesn't affect them, the thinness of the air doesn't affect them. It's so important, my friends. Let me show you why I'm saying this. When we want to fly for as high as we want to go, sometimes it's going to be so dangerous up there. It is going to be so dangerous that we will not go, and sometimes we might get seriously hurt because we want to take the risk. But won't you go? Will you not go? Will you say, oh, it is a dead zone, and so I will not go? If you truly want to distinguish yourself in anything that you're doing, you're going to have to overlook that and be willing to adapt somehow in that dead zone, because that is what is truly going to separate you from all the other cats and dogs and ladies and gentlemen. That is what is going, if you can survive that dead zone, if you can make it out of there, then like the climbers, the mountaineers that get to the top of Mount Everest, you're going to be one of those select few in your area of endeavor, whatever you choose to do, if you can make it past your dead zone, if you can find a way to survive, if you can get up there with your oxygen tank, if you can take whatever resources you know to help you survive, but don't be afraid of the dead zone. That is where your name will be made. That is where you will make your mark. That is where you will differentiate yourself. That is where you're going to stand apart because you have made it so. That is where you're going to use whatever God has given you and say to yourself, yes, I have added something that is in and of myself. That with whatever God blessed me with, I used this to add value. And I added it up to the point where I was able to survive that dead zone. There will be scars along the way. There will be times that you will fall. But you will get up. All the mountaineers who successfully make it to the top of Mount Everest, they make some mistakes. Sometimes they climb up and then they have to go all the way back down because it's not safe to continue. And then they will get up when it's safe again and they continue climbing. The key is that they never quit. The key is that they have factored all the challenges and all the dangers and they're prepared accordingly. And so they are flexible and they are patient, but they are also determined to make it to the tip, to go past that dead zone and to get to where they are going. Remember we talked about how the eagle trains its young from the top? Well, this is what it does. As it's training the young, when it starts falling and the little eaglet is flailing, the mother will swoop down and catch it. That is what God does for us. The Bible says as the eagle bears her young, so the Lord bears us. So don't be afraid too much. If you're walking in God's will, then even the dead zone is a safe place for you because it's there to catch you. Just be wise, not just smart, be wise. Be wise and obedient to what God is asking you to do. Because I really do believe that when you walk in the way God has asked you to do, even though you are in a dead zone, He still got you. And even if you get hurt sometimes, it's not that He wasn't there. He needs you to grow up. He needs you to see those scars. The scars are important too. The scars are also lessons for you. The scars are a very, very important lesson. In fact, it's a lesson of humility, a lesson to teach you gratitude, a lesson where you can turn around and help somebody else, a lesson where you don't take credit that doesn't belong to you, but you give it to God, a lesson that each and every day is precious. And so you have to get up every day and do your best because every moment is a gift. Finally, my friends, I read something very, 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 very interesting. I watched a video of one of the mountaineers who climbs Everest. This guy actually made it to the peak, and they went very high without taking supplemental oxygen, which is, these daredevils. That's a new thing they've been doing now for a few years now to try and get to the top without carrying an extra oxygen tank. And so these two guys, one of them, the previous year, he wasn't able to make it because of bad weather conditions, and so the trip was aborted. But the following year, he went in and completed it, and so both of them were sitting there. And he said something that was very touching. It just made me, it made me respect them even more though. He said that when you are climbing up, the higher up you go, you will literally see along your path, you see dead bodies. You will see other mountaineers who came in with the same hopes and dreams as you did, as you have, and they didn't make it. And they've died, and their bodies are just lying, they're there. And their bodies haven't been reclaimed for several reasons. Number one, it's very dangerous to go up there. There are even helicopters that can be used to go to such altitudes. They can't make it to the very top because helicopters too cannot handle the thin air there, just like we can. It's what you call those propellers. They don't function well in the air pressure that is that thin up there. So which means that they don't want to risk another person's life to go get another dead body. So oftentimes they let the bodies there. And so he was saying it that when they are climbing and they see those dead bodies, there's kind of a moment of reverence for like a fallen comrade. There's also a moment that reminds you that life, that you're undertaking a very risky endeavor, and that in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, if you're not careful, that can be you. So it teaches you patience. It teaches you diligence. It teaches you conscientiousness and painstaking excellence. It teaches you to pay attention to every detail, to prepare, because the bodies are literally, and because of the cold weather, it's kind of, some of them have been embalmed. The bodies don't decay because they are frozen. And so when you pass there, unless they are covered by snow, you see them in your ascent and your descent, and they're staring at you and saying, "Learn from me." Be wise. Smart is not enough. Sometimes we need that wisdom. My friends, for us sometimes, I think the bodies along our paths are the scars, our failures. They're our unfortunate experiences, our mistakes, our stupidity. We've all been all of that sometimes. But they're also there. When you look at that scar, it's to remind you to be humble this time around. It is to remind you to be careful. It is to remind you to be patient, to prepare well, not to take anything for granted. It is to remind you to make sure you do all that you can so that you do not end up a casualty, so that you do not end up a statistic, so that you don't end up to be one of those evidence strewn across the road to warn other people of. So, yes, let us take risk, but let us couple that with wisdom. Risk taking is not recklessness. Risk taking is very calculated. Risk taking involves a lot of preparation, a lot of study, a lot of research, a lot of good information. You don't just jump into something that you do not understand. I don't care how everybody tells you that it's very good. I don't care how much they try to convince you that this is a very worthy enterprise. Make sure you study it for yourself. Understand it. If you do not have questions when you begin and you go into it, chances are you're going to be always swimming upstream, trying to understand it each time because you're coming from behind. So make sure before you get into anything, understand it very well. Do your homework and be humbled by your scars, the scars of yesterday, the scars of past mistakes. Let them teach you. They are there to remind you of your previous arrogance. They are there to remind you of the times you got complacent and took things for granted. They are there to remind you when you were ungrateful. They are there to remind you when you became, when you had amnesia and forgot all the good things that God had done for you. They are there to remind you not to be foolish again. They are there to remind you that it is time to grow up, like Paul says, that when you are still a babe, you drink the milk. But make sure you are not one of those people when you ought to be teaching other people, you still need to be taught yourself. That when it's time for you to get up and eat grown food, you still need milk. In other words, the scars are meant to help us grow, to remind us that we must grow, that we cannot stay stagnant, that we cannot repeat the same mistakes day in, day out, year after year, that we must ascend. We must ascend. We must ascend. We must ascend, and ascend in a prepared way. We have to be like the eagle. Live from that elevated place. Have that standards that are high in every facet of your life. That's how the eagle lives. It hunts from its feeding to its mating to the raising of its young, to everything that it does. It is high up there. It doesn't come down here. It never lowers its condition based on the circumstances. Whether it's a storm or an earthquake or whatever the elements do, the eagle never says, oh, let me go down there right now because the conditions are not conducive for me. No, it always remembers who it is and uses the advantages that it has to remain up there. If anything, it adapts. It finds a way to make the negative conditions to work for it. And my friends, I think we live in a time when that's what we should do. There's so much change happening that a lot of things are going to be happening in our world that we've not seen it, at least not in our generation, maybe even our parents. There are things that we're going to learn on the fly. And so we have to make sure we are prepared. And since we can't prepare for everything, but at least the things that we ought to know, we should know them, and also be wise and flexible to take advantage of situation and also avoid the troubles that will come. There are difficult days and good days ahead. May the Lord help us that we are able to enjoy the good days and survive the difficult days and glide over that storm, and make sure that we always stay at that elevated place, because spiritually and mentally and every way that counts, we have decided that that is where we want to dwell, that in no way are we going to settle and come down here, that we are eagles, we belong up there, and we will soar and soar with excellence. That is what we have decided. We decided that. Nobody placed that on us. We said that is how we're going to live, and that is how we are going to conduct our lives in everything that we do. That is my prayer for all of us, because we are going to need it. The world needs us to do that. May we be the people who don't fail. The eagle flies. It doesn't only fly, it stays up there, and it glides over the storms when they come. I pray you're able to glide over the storms in your own life, because we all have storms. May you be able to see it from afar, to prepare accordingly, to take advantage of it, and to survive the ones that you can control. May God be with you always. God bless you, my friends. Thank you for watching me. It's so hard out here, but if I sit in the shade, it's dark. That's why I'm enduring the sun this way. Thank you for your time. I don't regret it. I appreciate your company. God bless you. If you will, please join me tomorrow. We're going to be looking at the lion. Yeah, the lion, the king of the forest. I love the lion. The Bible says he is the creature. He turns around for no man. He backs down for no man. I love the lion. I love the lion. I love the lion. It's my kind of animal. He backs down for no man. If you want this, come and get it. That is the lion. Please, let's visit the lion tomorrow. And I'm going to leave you with these parting words from Isaiah chapter 40 verse 31. I shall start from 30. That says, the young man will suffer, and the young people will utterly fail. But those that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. May you not go weary, and may you never faint in anything that you do. Wait on the Lord and keep mounting with those wings that he has given you. You have the wings already. Now keep mounting and soar, soar. Keep going. Don't look back. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.